Nuclear power school?
Yeah.
I thought it was hard.
I think everybody did probably.
Yeah, I thought it was hard, but I was impressed by the folks around me, and I thought that the caliber of the folks who were in that program were really impressive to me, and I figured I'd do my best to compete with them as I compete with anybody else. But I was really impressed with the quality and the caliber of the people that Rickover, even as controversial as he is, and he certainly is, but he had a process, and he had surrounded himself with extremely competent people. And the people they put together, both selecting those to go to sea and those who were on the staff in Washington and other places, was absolutely the finest people I've ever seen. So it was hard, but I enjoyed it, and I really liked the people that I was working with.
Do you remember anything about your interview with Rickover?
Quite clearly. He was, as you know, when you walk into the room with Rickover's sitting behind a desk, and then another officer, a commander, or a captain comes in with the general commander, and he sits in the back of the room. And so I walked in and sat in front of Rickover, and I started talking a little bit, and he asked me a couple of questions, and finally he said, "Hobbs, you're capricious. You're just telling me what you want me to hear." And he said, "Get out of here." So I've been there about a minute and a half. So I went back and picked up my hat in the back of the room and looked at the commander. I said, as we walked out of the room and shut the door, I said, "I guess I blew that." He said, "No, you were great." and of course, we knew all along, excuse me, that people had come into that experience, and they'd be sent down to the soaking room to steam for an hour, and then come back and have another interview with him, and then they'd be thrown out and they'd come back and steam for another hour. I was in there for a minute and a half, and that was it. So.
And he selected you.
He selected me, yes. Yeah.
Wow, wow. And how long was nuclear power school? And
well, the first part of the nuclear power school was in Vallejo at the Maryland Naval Shipyard, and that was the theoretical part. That was the physics part, and the toughest part, I thought.
Yeah.
But then the reactor, the practical training of the reactor, and learning how the reactor systems work and how the crews work, that was at this reactor at Combustion Engineering up in Windsor Locks, Connecticut. And that was a good experience. I really enjoyed that, and enjoyed the group. And
what was the first nuclear sub that you went to?
I went to the USS Patrick Henry, operating out of Holy Loch, Scotland. That was the number 2 of the Polaris missile firing submarines. The George Washington was the first in the class, and the second was the Patrick Henry. And I made 8 patrols on the Patrick Henry, back to back, all operating out of Holy Loch, Scotland. And of course our families lived in London, Connecticut, and we would fly over to Scotland and relieve the gold crew. I was a blue crew guy, and relieve the gold crew. But that was also a good experience. My counterpart in most of that business was a fellow out of the class of '57, and he was really an extraordinary guy. But he was the gold chief engineer, and I was the blue chief engineer. And I think he said in a letter to me, it was really sort of competitive to see who could turn over the ship in the best shape and have the fewest errors that the other crew could come in and find. So
very good.
This fellow is Jonathan Howe, retired Admiral Jonathan T. Howe, and
wow,
he's an interesting guy and a great friend and a terribly accomplished guy.
So that whole time you were engineering officer, right?
Not the whole time. I started off in the junior departments of the reactor side of the business, but I was not in the weapons system, and I was not in the navigation system. I was in the nuclear power side. So I started off as I forget what it was, a junior officer in the engineering department, and worked my way up and became chief engineer. I think I'd say after about two and a half patrols.
Well, then after all those patrols in Holy Loch, where'd you go from there?
Well, we came back from Holy Loch, and I was supposed to go to the Pentagon to be in some job in the Pentagon, and I was slated to go in, and I was on a Sunday evening. I got a call from the personnel department of the Navy, and they said, "You're slated to go to such and such an interview tomorrow. Go ahead and do that, but we've got your name in the hat for a job in the White House." I said, "Oh, what does that mean?" They said, "Well, just go ahead. You go to the interview you got tomorrow, but don't be surprised if you get another call and you're asked to go to the White House for an interview." I said, okay. And I said, what's the job? I said, the job is essentially the naval aide to the president. It's the same job that Captain Tazewell Shepard had in the Kennedy administration. But at this time, and Lyndon Johnson had been there for about a year and a half, and he wanted to change things. So they wanted they wanted the same functions done, but they didn't. I think Johnson's words were something to the effect that I don't need all these admirals and generals around me. Just give me some lean, mean folks, and we'll get the job done. So ultimately, I ended up in the White House. The White House came and picked us up at our home in Alexandria, Virginia, and took us to the White House. And Elizabeth and me both. We both went to the White House, and we were interviewed by the other members of the staff. The staff then, there were going to be an Air Force Lieutenant Colonel who was also the pilot of Air Force One, and he was the top aide, and he replaced a two-star general, Army general, and he was a lieutenant colonel. Then the Army aide, he replaced a colonel. He was a major, and then the Marine aide replaced also a colonel. He was a major. So, and I was a lieutenant commander at the time. So we ended up, I ended up leaving Elizabeth to talk with the military aides, and I went over to the West Wing to be interviewed by President Johnson and Bill Moyers. And that was an interesting time. I got there and I looked at the president's desk, and it was a stack of paper about yay thick, and he says, Hobbs, I don't know who you are, but this paperwork says you're a pretty good guy. And I said, my main interest is, can you be loyal to us and our family? I said, if we select you for this job, you will be a part of our family. You'll go everywhere we go, you'll be with us, you'll know everything there is going on, and you just have to think about what is your loyalty to us and to our mission. I said, I can certainly do that, Mr. President. Mm-hmm. So I got the nod on that, and we went to the White House. So
how long were you there?
Almost 3 years.
Wow.
I took over the same job, the same staff, the same group, the same responsibilities that Captain Tazewell Shepard had under the Kennedy administration. And the 4 military aides and the whole military department is now called the White House Military Office. And as a matter of fact, the current superintendent of the Naval Academy came as the head of that office. So we've had some fun comparing notes about the difference between then and now, and the responsibilities that office has now as the White House Military Office is no different from when it was the Office of the Armed Forces Aide to the President. It's the same group. We've got everything from airplanes to helicopters to evacuation routes to Camp David to the Navy mess to you name it. Carry the football, the whole routine that goes with the military side of the White House.
What was President Johnson like to work for?
Well, he was a terribly demanding guy, and there were not many attaboys in that environment. But you knew that was the environment, and once you know what it's like, then that's the way it works. But no, he was tough, he was demanding, and I really respected the ideas that he had for the things he wanted to do for the people in this country. And even though he was tough and hard, and you didn't get many pats on the back, you didn't have to have those. I really respected the ideas he had for what people needed and his great society ideas to bring them to the people.